This program is intended for mature audiences only. Parental discretion is advised. The opinions shared on this program may not necessarily reflect the views of the program, the host, or any of our advertisers or affiliates.
I grew up in the Caribbean. My dad's from Trinidad. My mom's from St. Lucia. My father was a minister. I grew up in the church. We were under that scrutiny as the pastor's kid. You were supposed to be perfect. You're talking about two girls growing up in the islands, and all of a sudden, bam, you're in America. Questions that I had about men and about myself and all of these emotions and feelings that I had conflicted with what I was learning about God and the church. And that conflict happens in life and love and relationships. I am a mother. I raised 3 boys, but most of all, I am a woman whose heart has been broken, who has gone through divorce, who knows what it feels like to lose somebody, and who knows what it feels like to desire somebody in your life that gets you and you get them. I know that being authentic and being real in this world opens you up to a lot of criticism, a lot of judgment. But I'm hoping that the show will be so authentic and so real that it really will touch people who are kind of living in the dark. There's no balance. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Balance with Diana J. As we continue part 2 of how slavery changed Black love today. So I want you to sit back, I want you to relax, and I want you to enjoy another episode of Balance with Diana J. This episode is exclusively sponsored by The Estates Home Sales and Rentals and MrRelationshipMan.com. Michael and Connie Smith are global speakers, global ministers, and book authors. Their interpretation of God and our sexuality is revolutionary. Order your copy of The Proper Way to Eat a Peach today at www.znppublishing.com/peach. On the last episode of Balance with Diana J.
But when you have two people coming together and they can't even agree on what roles we should play, that's why you see things like high divorce rates, right, within our marriages. You see things like that because we can't even come together on fundamental values. Because what we're talking about now are values. At the end of the day, we're talking about values, and we don't share the same values person by person or relationship by relationship. And that had a tremendous impact on the relationships we have today.
So I would almost say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that there was no area of a Black man's life at that time that wasn't torn down. There was
assaulted.
Really,
absolutely. Every aspect of his life was assaulted. Absolutely. I would submit that it was the same for women, although there were different assaults. It looked different. It took place in a different way. So we both were assaulted, but for the man in particular, everything about him was assaulted, and the attempt was to destroy who he was and leave the physical shell, because the physical shell was important because that was the labor. Yes, everything else that went with that, the soul, the spirit, right? The fighting spirit, the warrior, all of that had to be destroyed in order for slavery to succeed and be fruitful. And it was. And it was very efficient.
It was very productive. Yeah, very productive.
Yes.
The other thing that you brought up, that I'm glad you did, because that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about. And again, we haven't touched the women part yet. I still want to stay a little bit on the man.
Sure.
Is that, again, imagining a man in this particular position. And like you said, the example of walking in and seeing his wife being sexually assaulted by a slave master, abused, ridiculed, and not being able to say something, being whipped, not being able to say something. Literally, it was like the Black man's voice was taken away from him. And I wonder, again, when we look now into 2020, and one of the number one things that we hear about Black men is them not wanting to talk, not wanting to discuss what they're feeling, what they're thinking. But then when you look back to what you're explaining, they didn't have permission to talk. They didn't learn how to talk. They didn't have the ability to talk. Do you think that is a major part of why we have this mentality with men right now where they can't open up or find it very difficult to?
Well, there's different aspects to that. As men and women are wired differently. There's research that shows that we're literally wired differently in terms of our brains, how we process information, how we behave. Like, we're wired differently. For men, again, as warriors, as providers, it's sort of wired within us not to share our vulnerabilities, because as we share our vulnerabilities, it limits our ability to be that warrior and that protector, right? And so that's part of our wiring as men. I don't know that that's just slavery, but that's part of our.
Okay.
It's not just slavery, but slavery certainly. What slavery was, it was an amplifier. That's really what it was. It was an amplifier.
Okay.
It took how we were wired and really amplified it to the nth degree, right? So that not only are we generally wired not to express our inner thoughts, but we have no one to go to. Even if we wanted to, there's no one to go to. And that is its own trauma, right? That's a whole separate issue. When you want to protect your wife, but you can't go to anyone. You can't call the police. You can't go to your local congressman. There's no recourse. Ida B. Wells actually wrote in her book Lynchings and Other Southern Horrors. She wrote in the 1890s. She wrote that the shotgun should have a place of honor in every Negro home in America. Mm-hmm. She said the only time that we ever actually stopped ourselves from this trauma was when we defended ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. But that's why slave masters they understood that. That's why we even when the Civil War broke out, Black people were not allowed to join both the Union and the Confederacy initially, right? Because they were terrified of us having weapons and defending ourselves, and many of them rightfully so, right? We didn't have access to weapons. We didn't have access to means of control and power. That's why it was so important that even we weren't allowed to read, right? We weren't allowed to educate ourselves, because imagine how much angrier we would have been if we'd have known that our names were stolen from us. How much angrier would we have been if we had known that our ancestors were Muslim and then were made Christian, right? Which is that would be its own show right there, because even in terms of the culture, right? In Islam, the culture is very different, just on a cultural level, than Christianity, as it relates to men and women in the home, how they interact, right? There's a different structure in place, right? It's certainly patriarchal, right, in Islam. And it's unapologetically patriarchal in Islam, where the man is the head of the home, right? Yeah. Christianity speaks to that, all right, to some degree. It speaks to that, but culturally, we've seen a huge shift away from that, right? So when it comes to the relationships, right, again, we could literally spend this entire time just digging deeper and deeper into what that pain looks like and how it's amplified by all these different aspects of it, right? And again, we haven't even gotten to the women yet. No. To give you another example that I think is important, and this is anecdotal. This is just me. I went to, at the time, was the number one ranked prep school in the country. Now, the reason for high school. Now, the reason why I mention that is because it's important to understand that the people we're talking about here, these are like, folks who, had trust funds and could buy the school with their trust fund, right? These are kids who went to school and it was understood they were going to be doctors, attorneys, whatever. So my roommate was from Nebraska. And I remember this was probably the most educational moment I had at this school. It had nothing to do with class. He was this white kid from Nebraska. We were just getting to know each other. It was my first year at school. And we were walking along the campus and we see this young African-American girl, right? Who as it turned out, I had this huge crush on her. She was absolutely beautiful. She was actually a senior, right? And this was our first year there. And I'll never forget, he looks at her and he looks at me and he says, "Is she considered pretty?" And wow. I remember that, that the look you just gave, that was kind of the look I had, right? I was floored. Now, first of all, I'm not going to say her full, I remember her full name. This tells you how gorgeous she was, right? Right. This woman was beautiful in my eyes, right? She was gorgeous. And at first I became extremely angry at him, right? Like, what are you, do you see who this is, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
But I looked in his eyes. Diana, and I'm telling you, what I saw there was sincerity. He really was trying to work through, how do I feel about this Black woman, right? As a white male. When I saw that he was sincere, I took a breath, I took a step back, right? And I submit to you that this is something we all are going to need to do when it comes to the healing part, right? But
yes, I agree.
I took a step back and I took a breath and I reminded myself not to take his comment personally, and that he was really doing what children do, right? This is what children do. Children will ask you those questions that you look at them like, what? And you get upset, but then you realize they're asking out of innocence, right? And it's funny, that's another thing. We're taught as adults not to do that, right? That socially it's not acceptable. But he was childlike in his heart. And so I responded to him in that way. And I said, listen, what I think about whether or not she's pretty isn't important. I said, what matters is, do you find her attractive? Do you think she's pretty? That's all that really matters here. And he said, yeah, I think she's gorgeous. And I said, well, there's your answer, right? Now, Diana, here's the key. And this is what I think ties in most to what we're trying to talk about here. I think because he saw that I handled it in that way and that I was being upfront with him, he then shared something with me that I never forgot since. He said, well, I've always found Black women, to be really attractive. I think they're beautiful, right? But I just don't see a lot of Black people where I'm from. But the Black women that I've seen, I think they're gorgeous. He said, but to be honest with you, I'm terrified of Black men.
Wow.
Yeah, let that sink in. This was a kid from a well-to-do family who was going to be well-to-do, right? It's in the cards, right, for him to be well-to-do. This man is going to be a judge, an attorney, a police officer. I hope you see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
A firefighter, right? A legislator, a governor, who is secretly, in his heart of hearts, terrified of Black men, but who finds himself attracted to Black women, and who has to fight that dichotomy even inside himself. What does that do when you're a cop and you're terrified of Black men? We're seeing this play out every other day, it seems like.
Wow.
We're seeing this play out all over the country, and we've seen it play out for years. Now, again, I think the only reason why he shared that with me was because of the way I responded to him. But imagine somebody who didn't have access to because there are people who grew up who have literally had no access to Black people.
Yes.
Who then,
it's true.
And have not had this conversation. And He's an attorney or a governor or a legislator setting up jail systems, and they're terrified of black men.
Yes.
We see this play out. We're seeing this play out. And it doesn't just impact the relationships between black men and black women. It impacts our place in society. It impacts how we see ourselves. In my grandfather's day, you weren't going to become an attorney or a judge or a doctor or a legislator. You were either going to sling in the streets, or you were going to become a janitor, right? Or you were going to become some sort of manual labor, right? That's what you were going to be. And what does that do to a man who comes home and this is another dynamic we're seeing more and more of, right? This starts to give some context as to why we look at colleges across the country and you see a tremendous amount of black women there, but not nearly as many black men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We see this play out all across the country. As a matter of fact, and I won't name the college, I was actually recruited. This is a true story. I was recruited out of high school to attend this major university. They were going to give me a free ride there. And the reason why they were going to give me a full 4-year free ride to attend this university was because they had no black males there. They had very few. And they had this tremendous amount of black women there. And they were terrified they were going to lose their black female students. This is what my counselor told. He told me straight up. He told me this is the deal. We're giving away 4-year scholarships just to black males because we're terrified we're going to lose these women. We're terrified we're going to lose them.
We are in a fragile real estate market, and maybe you are wondering where you stand with your property. Well, guess what? The Estates Home Sales and Rentals are experts in this type of market, and they're ready to help you in the areas of residential, commercial, rentals, land sales, and acquisitions. Give them a call at 407-930-0626 or visit them at theestatesflorida.com. And don't forget to let them know Diana J sent you.
This is how you see that play out.
Yeah. Even today, as you said. And again, when we look back at the timelines of how far back, slavery took place, even though it really, a lot of ways, some dynamics or some phases of it wasn't that long ago. But when we look at that and we look at what is happening today between men and women, you see how much we haven't healed from. We just kind of navigated the best we knew how, but
That's
we haven't
exactly
healed from it. We haven't healed from it. We haven't addressed it. We haven't talked about it enough. We do talk about slavery. We talk about how it affects us as a people, but we don't talk about how did it affect us in relationships, and how can we formulate communities without relationships? How do we form families? It all starts with a relationship.
Yes.
The majority of us that, believe in God, we know that it started with a man and a woman. But here we are when it comes to the Black community, and it seems like, again, like you said, we had no baseline, and we've just been navigating the best we could, and we really haven't done that great of a job. Because even when you look at, in my opinion, when you look at our community in comparison to our other communities, we didn't have the resources, the counselors that look like us, the therapists that look like us, the education that looked like us to tell us or to show us how to do better. We didn't have any of that. In this day and age, we see more, of this happening. But what about all the generations before that was affected? And when you look at our age group, we're in our 50s. We're in our 50s, and we're now, seeing some resources start surfacing for us.
Yes.
But again, I think it's so important, as you and I continue to have this conversation, is that we become more aware of why are we the way we are? Why do Black women look at each other the way we do? Why is there jealousy between us? Why is hair, such a big deal in the community? Why is it a defining moment of beauty, whether your hair or the size of your butt? And where did we get all of this from?
Yes.
And with men, the endowment. Where did we get all of these things as measuring sticks of how good of a person, a Black man we are, or how good of a Black woman we are? But let me, I want to go back a little bit. We talked a lot about the man, and I think it's really important that we talk about that. Makes our women more aware and kind of give us more of a visual of what the trauma that our men went through. But now let's talk about the woman.
Sure.
Again, here you have the female, and you touched on it quite a bit. Her hero, the person that she looked up to, the person that she knew she had nothing to worry about. He would take care of her. She didn't have to worry about the next meal on the table. It would be there. She didn't have to worry about her children not having anything. It would be provided for. She knew that, at the end of the day, he was coming home and I was preparing a meal for him. All of these things have been stripped away from her now. A woman that was, I believe, that was created to find security. And, I think in our community, we think that security means money. It's not the money. It's a security of a male figure in the position of protecting, and someone that you can depend and look on to help in making, a whole relationship, household, community.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit.
If you don't mind, if I could just interject one point there about security,
Please,
I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Security also means having faith in what's coming ahead, right? When we think of security, we think of this idea that we're very sure, we're clear about what's about to happen next month, next year, right? In 5 years. One of the ways that's stripped from us is that you have this family unit on a slave plantation, and you don't know if this is your last day together. You have no clue if tomorrow your child, your wife, your sibling is being sold away. You have no clue. And if you can imagine, so there literally is no security in feeling day after day for the husband, for the wife, or for the children. There's no security there at all. You don't know if today is the last day you will be with your family. And many of these families were torn apart, sold apart, never to see their child, their wife, their husband again. Many stories I've read many stories about once slavery ended, the first thing many people did, those who didn't stay on the plantation and sharecrop, they went to look for their families, because that was the trauma in their hearts for the decades that many of them spent. And they had no clue, no idea where their family was,
their loved ones were.
And that is a trauma you take with you every night you go to bed. You wake up not knowing if today is the day that I lose my family. And we see that playing out again in the structures of our families now, where our families are apart. You see the man is gone, the children are out, the wife is doing what the woman is doing, whatever, and leading the family. And our family structure has been ripped apart completely. And just as a matter of context, though, I think this is important to make this comparison. If you look at the Jewish community and the African American community, which for me is fascinating, because I really think the more we look at each other as communities, the more we really should be working together, right? You have these two communities that suffered these tremendous traumas, right? And again, I'm not here to debate which trauma was more impactful. I don't. That's not important for me for this discussion. I think what's important is understanding we have these two communities that undergo these long periods of trauma. In the Jewish community, though, One thing that was not taken was your names, right? They took their names with them when they came to America. So they still have their name. Their connection to Israel was not taken from them. So they have this source of pride in being from Israel. And of course, Israel is a relatively new country, right? In 1948. But even going back to the Bible, as Israelites, they take pride. One of the things about the Jewish community, their culture, is that they're split into these 12 tribes, and part of the whole culture is knowing what tribe you belong to and tracing that genealogy. You see that in our Christian Bibles. If you look at the Old Testament, you'll see whole books starting with he begat, he begat, he begat, he begat, he, because that was imperative to, because it was, you had to know what tribe you belonged to, because tribes were ascribed different jobs, right? The Levites were the ones who took care of the temple. So you had to prove that you were a Levite in order to take care of the temple. So that pride was taken. Now, even with the trauma that they faced, say with slavery in Egypt and with the Holocaust, they taught each other that story. They taught their children the story of the Holocaust, and you hear ring out in the Jewish community, never again. That was always their rallying cry, never again. And it gives them strength, and it gives them the ability to rise above that and work together. Now compare that with the African American community, right? Where we're brought to America, we're stripped of our name and given these names that have no meaning to our ancestors, no meaning to us outside of giving it new meaning. So we don't have that connection. You ask most African Americans today, they can't tell you what country in Africa their forefathers were from. Most can't. Now, clearly there are some that can, but the vast majority of us cannot. And so that's stripped from us, right? Our identity and our worth. And I'm making the clear connection between our identity and our worth, because our identity is tied. If you don't know who you are, you certainly can't know how much value you have.
Right.
But importantly, the way we dealt with our trauma was very different. Many of our elders, in order to survive slavery, they had to shine on, right? You had to smile, you had to dance and sing and pretend that everything's okay. That was the way we survived, right? That was our strength, the ability to literally act like it's almost, especially in front of our slave master, act like nothing's not even there. I mean, we can even go into the stories of, the slave songs, the spirituals, which were actual signals to one another, right? Even for the Underground Railroad, there were signals even in the spirituals about where to go, right? Those sorts of things.
Right.
And so we did that with our own children. In order to protect our children, we refused to tell the stories of what happened to us. We refused. Our idea was to protect our children by not sharing with them what we went through. And that's why we don't have that in our community. And we don't talk about it, because that's been ingrained in us, that to protect us, we don't talk about it. But I would submit that has done harm ultimately, because slavery to us is just something we read about or heard about, but we have no clue why it's impacting us and what it's doing to us. We don't have the never again. We don't have that. And just as important, and again, this is another important distinction in slavery and its impact on us, our relationships. The whole idea of dark skin versus light skin, good and bad hair, right? Where the light skin African Americans were brought into the slave master's home and had the jobs in the home, preparing food and taking care of the children and being nannies. The dark-skinned ones were the ones that were out in the field. That's why you hear today, you hear people say field niggas. You hear people say that even today. And imagine what kind of trauma that is to look at another person of color and another African American and call him that or her that, right? Even the idea of good and bad hair. I still hear people referring to our hair as good or bad, right? Because we do not have this connection to our culture as the Jewish community does. And so we've bought into what the Europeans have taught us about good hair means it's straight, it's manageable. Right? when all manageable means is manageable for you, right? If all
Yes,
hair is
exactly.
manageable, if you know how to manage it, right? If you
All
know how
of
to
them.
take care of it, all hair is manageable, right?
Yes,
But we
yes.
still have in us this idea, and so what that does is, again, that trauma that we have hasn't gone outward, it's gone inward, and it's gone amongst each other. So we cuss each other out. We still call each other the N-word. Slavery been done since 1865, but we still call each other the N-word. You still hear
Yeah,
black women calling each other a B, calling each
yeah,
other a B, right? We still
yeah.
see that, and that's all because of what we've been discussing.
Experience the power of essential oils with Zens, the world's first wearable aromatherapy technology for men and women that can relieve stress, increase concentration, or energize you while you're on the go. It's your mood, your day, your way. Experience Zens. 100% natural, vegan friendly, and no synthetic medications. Call 404 368 5836 to place your order today. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned some of that because I think you and I had talked a little bit about it, and I had talked to some other male coaches about it, and even my experience growing up. And again, a lot of my roots came from the Caribbean, but funny enough, a lot of Black Americans don't, even now, up to this day, don't look at us or accept us as being part of the Black community. And
Yeah.
when we talk about, Kamala Harris, and I see it all the time on Facebook, she's not Black. And again, it makes me think back on, again, where did this start? Where we, even within our own community, can look at each other and we can say, you are a Black man, you are a Black woman, but because your hair is different, or maybe because your mother was of a different race or something, then all of a sudden you totally discredit them from the Black community. Where did that come from? And you just kind of said it and explained that, again, a lot of this comes from the mentality that we never healed from.
Right. And
So
we split up,
go ahead.
we fight amongst ourselves, and we make distinctions among ourselves that that aren't even real. For instance, I'm a Black Puerto Rican male. My father was Puerto Rican. My mother's African American. Right. So what does that
Right.
make me? Right. And you'll
Yes.
have people that grew up with me that tell me I'm not Black because my father was Puerto Rican, and I beg to differ. Right.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, I hosted BT Tonight, and I used to do these. Um, I used to do seminars. I used to do community forums. And at City College, as a matter of fact, I did a community forum called "Are African Americans, Caribbeans, and Latinos One and the Same People?" I actually brought that topic to BET Tonight. I actually hosted that on BET Tonight. That show actually became the highest rated show on BET Tonight to that point. Where
Wow.
I had this PhD who was she was from somewhere in South America. I don't remember exactly where, and she started talking about from her perspective, whether or not we were the same. And culturally, you have people who look like me in Puerto Rico who, when you ask them, "Are you Black?" they say, "No, I'm
Yeah.
not Black." Right? I'm
And no,
Puerto
I
Rican
know.
because they
And all the islands.
because they don't they because it has its own connotations. They carry the same issues with skin color that we do
Yes.
here. There's a tremendous amount of trauma that we continue to inflict on each other now. Malcolm X talked about this. The slave masters got to a point where they no longer had to enslave us. We're now at the point where we're enslaving ourselves mentally, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I had said previously, I just don't think we've had enough discussions where we have really talked about all the dynamics of slavery and how it affects us as men and women in relationships. And as you said before, Steve, it really goes deep and it branches off into so many areas, how we look at each other, how women look at men and how men look at women. So my question to you is now, as we start wrapping up, is what do we do moving forward? Obviously, we have a lot of trauma. We have a lot of healing, that we need to go through. And obviously, our parents and our parents' parents and our parents' they didn't go through the healing process. So now here we are, a more maybe aware generation of trying to be aware of, what did we do wrong and how can we do it right? When it comes to the relationships between Black men and women, how do we start looking at each other differently? I mean, Steve, before you answer that question, am I incorrect in saying that I think that we're the only race that demeans each other the way that we do in music, in how we call each other, and doing it in a public forum, but not only doing it in a public forum, but, making it part of our everyday social conversations. I just don't see that happening in other communities. And again, probably dynamics of us trying to just figure out how to appreciate each other and not doing a good job of it, or how to address each other. I mean, tell me your thoughts on that. We are in a fragile real estate market, and maybe you are wondering where you stand with your property. Well, guess what? The Estates Home Sales and Rentals are experts in this type of market, and they're ready to help you in the areas of residential, commercial, rentals, land sales, and acquisitions. Give them a call at 407-930-0626 or visit them at theestatesflorida.com. And don't forget to let them know Diana J sent you.
Well, I think you see that in one, I would say that the way that we are traumatizing each other is unique, to say the least. It's unique. But what I would preface that by saying that so is our story. Because our story has these unique challenges and issues to them, that's why you're seeing the trauma play out the way it is. That's also why you see the trauma play out differently in different communities, right? So I just want to be careful to make sure that we have context for that. Because yes, we are traumatizing each other in ways that you don't see in other communities, but I would submit to you that that's because our story is unique, right? And the trauma played out differently. And the way we handled it played out differently. I'll do it as something as simple as this. You see Black men calling Black women B's and H's. We see us calling each other the N-word. You don't see people in the Jewish community calling themselves by the name that's derogatory. You do not see that. You don't see in the Asian community people calling each other by derogatory name. You don't see that. It doesn't play out that way. And I'd submit to you that the biggest reason for that is because of the lack of awareness of the trauma. Whereas in the Jewish community, they're very aware of their trauma and they teach their trauma. In our community, we don't. That's why you see it play out the way you do. And therein lies the beginning of the answer, right? The way we stop traumatizing each other is by starting to first, and the hard part about this is, where does it begin, right? We have to start becoming aware of what the trauma actually has been. We need to have this conversation about what exactly happened to us. Because most of us don't know. We don't know what really happened to us. And it has to get to this level. What happens when you get whipped on a tree? Like we don't know, right? you literally get the flesh torn off your back. That's what these whips do. And we don't understand that, right? We don't
Yeah.
understand what it means to, and then we need to tell the story of what happens when that is happening in front of your family, right? We
Yeah.
have to start sharing that this is what happened to us. Face it, first and foremost, the first thing. Jay-Z it's funny, I was listening to Jay-Z earlier today, and he talked about, don't run from the pain, go towards it, right? And it's a song he has called Lost One. We said, don't run from the pain, go towards it. And that's what we have to finally do. In boxing, they teach you that actually. My dad was a Golden Gloves boxer. My grandfather was a prize fighter. In boxing, they teach you that you have to turn in. Like if that person's inflicting pain on you, what you have to do is go towards it and clench them up. You can't, the more you run, try to move away from it, the more that's coming. So you have to go to it. And we as a community have to start advancing towards our pain, facing it once and for once and for all, and understand what happened to us. That's the first thing we have to do. How that happens is really the tricky part. It starts by having shows like this. That's why I started Elevate Your Life, the online course I did, because my purpose in starting something like that is to bring us out of our fears and feeling trapped and to elevate our lives, right? So the second thing we have to do is, once we start becoming more and more aware of what's happened to us, we have to start seeking healing processes to bring us out of this. And I've talked to you about this before on the segment I was with you before. That's another stigma in our community about seeking professional help for our trauma. We have to get over that. As a community, it's time for us in some form of fashion to start finding some help for us on a professional level, where we actually get the counseling we need to sort through what we're feeling, what we're dealing with. And it's funny, as an educator, I talked about this and how we should develop our schools. This could be part of our community schooling, where we actually have this sort of access to that kind of stuff in our communities. I think the key is to be self-aware and to start really finding ways to build ourselves up individually. And that education, and understanding that education is more than math and reading and arithmetic, but it's personal development, right? Knowing our history, understanding who we are. How do our emotions tie to our relationships? Where do we get them from? Why do we see relationships the way we do? We're not going to get that in school. We have to start teaching that on ourselves. And then the third thing is, we have to start healing our family structure. We have to start having conversations as men and women about what roles we're going to play in our family units. And again, that could look different unit by unit. We have to have some sort of general consensus about what that looks like. And it took us hundreds of years to get here. The challenge is that this isn't going to be a fix that we have in a couple of months. This is going to be something that takes some time for us to do, but we have to begin that process, and we need to do it. We need to do it 100 years ago.
Experience the power of essential oils with Zence, the world's first wearable aromatherapy technology for men and women that can relieve stress, increase concentration, or energize you while you're on the go. It's your mood, your day, your way. Experience Zence. 100% natural, vegan-friendly, and no synthetic medications. Call 404-368-5836 to place your order today. Yeah, no, I mean, those are all, again, such great points, Steve. And like I said, I wish we had more time, because again, there's just so many areas that really need to be discussed for us to really understand why we are here where we are now, and how can we heal, like you were saying, where we are now, but also teach our children,
if I can, to
have relationships.
Yeah, and one thing I would say too, and I think this is where we begin. As I'm sitting here, this is where we begin. I began by understanding that history is important, and I studied it on my own. Right? I didn't rely on what other people taught me. We have to start investing in our own self identity and self worth by researching who we are.
Yeah.
Read books, read about our culture, our history, read about who we are. It begins there because once you gain that knowledge, you get the confidence to then teach it to others. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but I think that was important to say. Each individual, just start with yourself because you can start there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Such great points. Well, I definitely, want to bring you back on, Steve, in the future, and maybe we can, talk about some areas that we didn't have time to talk about today. Because, like I said, I'm going to keep reiterating that I think that the only way that we're going to heal and start building back relationships, building that baseline, like we talked about in the very beginning, so that our generations preceding us can have something to go with. It really has to start with us, just becoming more transparent and aware of what we've been through, what we haven't healed from, and start talking to each other about ways that we can find healing and look at each other with more respect as men and women,
Yes.
in relationships, but also women looking at each other more respectfully, and men looking at each other more respectfully, just as a community. But before we wrap up, I know, and again, I appreciate you so much because you took some time to come out and do this interview with me. And I know that you were really busy, especially with the
Yeah.
launch of your new
Yes.
project. So can you please give the audience a little bit of an idea of what you have going on before we get
Yes.
ready to wrap it up?
Absolutely. So again, my passion in my work is about getting men and women to overcome feeling trapped and feeling afraid, and creating the lives they envision without fear of the challenges that they face. So the way I'm doing that is I'm launching an online course called Elevate Your Life with elements, just the things that we talked about today: self-awareness, keys to the perfect relationship, from confidence to power, those sort of issues, to finally create the lives you want. And so you can find that, you get information on that at steveburlack.com. Click the Elevate Your Life tab, and you can opt in there to get more information about that. I'm also doing a live webinar coming up in the next few weeks. Before the year's out, I'm doing a live webinar, The Impact of Attitude on Success. Look for that. You'll find that also. Go on my website, steveburlack.com. I'm actually going to be putting that out shortly. I actually just started that, even with the launch. So I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to helping people overcome this trauma. That's my passion. And so I look forward to working with whoever's ready for that sort of transformation out of being trapped and being afraid, being not knowing their self-value. It's time to create our lives that we envision. So you'll find me on steveburlack.com. You'll find me on Twitter at @sburlack. I'm on Instagram, @sburlack. You'll find me on Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
Well, thank you so much again, Steve, for taking the time and, just educating us and opening our eyes on, some of our history and mindsets that we have built over the years. And again, I want to thank our audience so much for tuning in again. Remember, every Saturday at 9 p.m. to tune in, and we are going to continue having subjects again that we are not addressing the surface parts of relationships. We are digging deep to find out the roots of what needs to be done in order for us to have healthier and better relationships spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So keep tuning in, and don't forget to click the subscribe button, and I will see you next Saturday at 9 p.m. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Diana, for having me.